It's lovely to see so many people here. Thank you to Waterstones for hosting. Thank you to Red Door for all their organisation. As most of you know, we're here this evening to celebrate the launch of Andrew Marshall's book, My Mourning Year. And for those of you who don't know, I'm sure you probably all do know, it's actually a memoir about the death of his partner Thom in 1997. So, quite strong stuff, and as some of you probably also know, Andrew is actually a writer of self-help books. He's written 18 self-help books, one of them actually being an international bestseller, I Love You But I'm Not In Love With You. And also you continue to work as a writer for things like the Daily Mail and Mail on Sunday, but also as a marital therapist in London and Sussex, soon to be somewhere else, potentially. I don't know whether I'm allowed to say that. Obviously, it is a book that is on a very sensitive subject matter, but for anyone who's already read it, and I am testimony to this, it's also a very, very uplifting and often funny book, if I can say that. It's true. It starts at the point of Thom's death. So I personally found that quite difficult to read, but then it's about what happens to Andrew after. So I thought that that's obviously what I'm going to talk about with Andrew this evening. We're going to chat for about 25-30 minutes, and Andrew, I hope, is going to be coaxed to read a couple of excerpts, and then what we'll do is open it out to everybody to join in the conversation.
There are a few people here who actually knew Thom as well and who feature in the book, and I'd quite like to introduce a couple of them as well.
Oh, I'd love that, because I've obviously, having just read it, I'm really curious to know. I'm thinking, possibly. Let's pencil up and make notes, yeah. So there is a dramatis personae at the back. That's the playwright in you, Andrew. So yeah, that's really... So I suppose my first question is, why now? Just an easy one to begin with.
Well, I am still absolutely terrified of publishing this book, because it seems a very strange thing to say when you've written a memoir, but actually I'm really quite a private person. So to expose all my inner workings is a little bit of a terrifying thing. But I have shared this with several people, some of them actually here this evening, when they've actually had a bereavement, and they found it incredibly helpful. One friend said, "I'm not the only person going mad." And so I thought that maybe more people would like it. But I feel very strongly that we don't give enough support for people who've been bereaved in our culture. Because we don't like to talk about death and we want to try and minimise it, we therefore minimise the experience of being left behind. And we're terribly supportive coming up to the funeral, and maybe for a whole week after the funeral. But actually, I think that it takes, I'm saying a year, but the reality is it takes even longer than that to recover from a bereavement. But I think we should give people the honour of a mourning year. And there were just little things that were done. For example, I don't know if Jackie, who is a friend, she actually, on the day of the first anniversary of Thom's death, sent a bunch of flowers to me. It was just the most beautiful thing. And to actually sort of to say that first full year, you need support and you need beautiful gestures like that. And it's sort of a bit of a campaign that we should be thinking not of mourning as something that happens up to the funeral and afterwards, you go back to work and all is forgotten, but it's at least a year of support. So it's a campaign. I'm a campaigning person.
I like the idea of that, actually. Could start a trend here. So do you think then, leading on from that, do you think that it's because we as a society, as a culture, how do you think we deal with death? How do you think we and I'm talking specifically perhaps in this country, because I know that it's very different in different countries. So let's start with that and just say, what do you think about that? How do you think we deal with death?
Well, it's something that happens off stage. We don't actually talk about it. You know, death is, we pass away. It's all rather nice, and you know, if you're lucky, you'll have the violins playing in the background on the TV version of it. But actually, it's not like that. And you know, I lied to Thom's mother. She said, you know, was it peaceful? And I said yes, because you know, do you want to lie to a mother who's lost her son? And I suppose I didn't. I want us to be more honest about that, because although death is horrible, that out of Thom's life came lots of wonderful and beautiful things that he gave me. I knew this was going to happen. He gave me so many gifts. In many ways, the greatest gift he gave me was really having the courage to become a true writer as opposed to a journalist, writing stupid newspaper articles. Because when Thom died in Germany, well away from everybody, in a time when if you wanted to speak to somebody in England, you went downstairs to the phone and you put a 1 mark piece in the machine.
That's something you really get actually when you read it, is the fact that it was a very different time. I'm going to bring that up a bit later on actually, because talking about it being quite a different time. But also, I mean, are you up for reading?
Yes, of course.
I'm sort of. Oh, do come and join us. There's a seat at the front here actually. I'm just going to give a tiny little sort of lead up to this reading. Andrew actually told me to pick the bits, because I think it's quite hard sometimes when you've written something yourself. It's sort of better to somebody else's, you know. And as I said earlier, although it's terribly sad, it is also funny, because you know, we were talking about how things don't go according to plan when people are dying or when people have died. They don't. And this is a case in point. So just to sort of lead up, that you've already had the funerals in Germany, and so you wanted to, the ashes came to the UK.
Yeah, they were posted to me.
They were posted to you.
And that was a very strange experience. Suddenly, oh, there's a parcel for me. Oh, how exciting. You run downstairs and you suddenly realise you're holding your partner's ashes.
So strange, isn't
and
it?
being me, I then thought, I wonder what other strange things they send through the post. And I actually ended up writing a newspaper article about all the strange things that are sent through the post. And so that's in the book as well.
And wasn't one of them pig semen?
Yes, pig semen.
And you said something about the post offices have the right temperature or something to keep it viable.
This country is one of
He's taught me something.
This country is one of the best places if you want to send pig semen through the post, because first and foremost, most of our post offices or post office delivery places are Victorian, so they're cold, and they deliver them in vans, and vans are cold, so actually the semen stays fresh for longer. So it's one of the places that we lead the world.
So there you learn something new every day, don't you? Absolutely.
So you get that as well as all the misery.
You get that as well. So basically, the ashes have come, and you're going to go and actually scatter the ashes. And on the day of the scattering of the ashes, and Thom chose the place, which was Beachy Head.
Which was once again I had very mixed feelings about Beachy Head.
I think anyone who lives in Sussex would feel that too. But the first bad bit of news is that on the day, is Maureen here?
Yeah, Maureen's down at the front here.
Oh, so Maureen, you got food poisoning and couldn't come. That's right. So Maureen couldn't come, so that was the first blow. And I know that for you, you know what it's like when you're sort of girding your loins for something, and then the next blow was that the German side of the family, Jürgen, who is Thom's brother, they had a problem with the plane, and it was looking like they weren't going to make it. But then they got diverted to Heathrow, and so it was back on again. So I'm going to get Andrew to take it from there. Basically, I've given you the little sort of lead up. So I think just from there, basically.
Yep.
Yeah.
By the late afternoon, when we had all gathered at my house, it had begun to drizzle and the weather had turned cold. Gary asked to borrow a coat as he'd only brought sunny weather clothing. He was shocked by how much Jürgen looks like Thom. I pretended not to be surprised, but the familiarity has not escaped me. Although a hug of condolence from Jürgen feels nothing like having Thom in my arms, it is the nearest I will ever get. I was never keen on Thom's choice of Beachy Head for scattering his ashes. The white cliffs and the open grassland might look picturesque, but the place also holds the world's record for the most suicides every year. However, Thom was adamant. The closer the minibus I'd hired got to Beachy Head, the more convinced I became that today was a mistake. Staring out of the rain-smeared windows, my sense of frustration was rising. If Jürgen, Garby and Walter had not travelled so far, I would have suggested turning back. A thick sea fog hung over the South Downs. I had imagined us drinking in the beautiful scenery and celebrating Thom's life. Instead, we could only see about 10 feet in front of ourselves. My pastoral idyll had been transformed into a nightmare. I've been to hell so often I should be eligible for frequent flyer miles. The rain had stopped by the time the driver parked the minibus. I could tell that nobody wanted to get out. The plan had been to find a particularly beautiful spot for Thom's final resting place. But in the fog, one tuft of grass looks very much like the others. It was so cold we were all huddled into our coats. The only thought in our minds was to get it over as quickly as possible. We followed a fence, hoping that it was a barricade to stop us falling over the edge of the cliff, but after a few minutes decided to stop. With no idea where we were, and at risk of not being able to find the bus again, we decided that here is as good as anywhere. It was about as healing as letting down the tyres of a gang of Hell's Angels motorbikes. We formed a small half circle, our backs to the wind. I'm mouthing words about how much I love Thom, and everybody's listening intently, so I must be making sense. But what I'm really thinking is, when does the shock of losing someone go away? I feel numb and detached from everybody else. Jürgen in particular is weeping, and I'm just watching with mild interest, a scientist conducting an experiment into grief. Apparently it takes only 6 seconds to fall the 535 feet from the top of the cliff at Beachy Head to the beach below. So far this year, the average age of all the people who have committed suicide is exactly 43, the same age as Thom. Even though I'm holding his urn, which is surprisingly heavy, I do not feel really there. I reach down to press the play button on the cassette player and nothing happens. What little poetry that the moment possessed is lost as I fumble around. How could this have happened? I must have checked it 100 times. Eventually I rewind the tape and find the first song, Dream a Little Dream of Me by Mama Cass. In my vivid imagination, the mix-up with the music has been arranged by Thom, along with the plain fault to stop us being there today. Perhaps he had read the celestial weather forecast. Misery, misery, misery. Next I play Judy Collins' 4 Strong Winds and start to liberate my lover. Judy sings, the good times are all gone and I'm bound for moving on. I am untouched. The wind tosses the ashes into a million different patterns like a small child turning a toy spyglass with a kaleidoscope. I'm intrigued by the shapes that the wind spells out, but I feel no connection with the man I loved and the coarse, sandy substance we're casting into the fog. Despite all the significance our culture invests in this moment, all I found inside Thom's urns was waste product. Thom is somewhere else.
Thank you very much. That was very brave. I think that was very. I think he deserves a round of applause. Very brave. When we talked about this, Andrew was saying that obviously it is significant that he is a gay lover, but also he said, I think when you read it, and I would say that to all of you, this is absolutely true, it's just about bereavement. It's about love, and it's about people, and it's about losing people, and what happens to you after you lose people. And I do think we need to talk about it. And one of the things we also talked about on the phone was how, and I really identified with this after I've lost my father and I lost a very, very good friend. You go a bit mad. You definitely do go a bit mad.
Only a bit?
Only depends. And, you know, I think in that first year particularly, that madness is upon you. And you do some very strange things. Shall we move on to those strange things, Andrew? The first strange thing, well, not necessarily, is the munchkin. Do you want to tell them a little about the munchkin?
No, you can.
So the munchkin is not a fortune teller, really, a sort of psychic.
Right.
Yeah,
Yes,
a psychic.
yeah.
Who? Now, which friend was it that it was the friend? That
My friend Kate.
Yeah, is Kate here?
No, Kate's not here.
Yeah.
Kate describes herself as a witch, and my editor had to actually check with me that is she really a witch or is she just witchy? And she's just witchy. She isn't really a witch.
Now, before that, would you ever have gone to see a psychic?
No.
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 So it's an interesting thing, and I also know a lot of people, a lot of friends who have done the very same thing.
Yeah, I also went to a meeting where people do a presentation of powers, and I was very sceptical, and it was somebody who was training, and they were getting absolutely nowhere. And they said, "Oh, we've got a message for the person at the back." And so I turned around, and I discovered that I was the person at the back.
Yeah.
I can't remember what the message was. It's probably in the book, but just that I couldn't believe that Thom would wait to the end. He was always somebody who would have been there to the front of the queue. But any time that Kate went to a psychic, because at exactly the same time we were agony aunt and agony uncle on a cable TV station. We had more problems than all the people that wrote into this. This was a TV station where they had topless darts, and so it was a very, very weird kind of place. But anyway, whenever she went to get help with all of her various problems from psychics, she would always get a message from me. So it almost felt like if there was a sort of like a celestial telephone box that Kate's departed lovers were being pushed out of the way by Thom, who was always...
He was eclipsing all of them.
Always coming through with all these blue messages. For
did the Munchkin get anything right?
Well, quite a lot. That's the thing that's actually really quite terrifying. And some of the things that she got wrong, that I say, at the time, she got this wrong, she got that wrong. And she said things like, I would be becoming involved with monks. And I thought, that's a very weird idea. I'll have nothing to do with bloody monks. And, 18 months later, I was going to a Buddhist centre full of monks to meditate. So...
Yeah.
I don't know, is it just that making good guesses? But to say you're going to be involved with monks is just a little bit weird, really, isn't it?
And do you feel that the sort of, the reason for going was a sort of need to have some sort of closure, or was it almost just like a hope that something might come of it? What do you think was the reason for going?
That, bizarrely enough, I had quite a lot of contact from Thom.
Oh yeah.
Which
the
is
vanilla.
Which.
Do you want to?
Okay.
Explain.
Well, I'm the most rational person in the world, so I just think it's complete and utter madness, and I don't know whether it's the fact that I have an incredibly vivid imagination because I'm a writer, but. Kate, my witchy friend, because Thom was having huge problems dying, said, light a candle for him, it will help him pass over. And, it gave me a trip out of the hospital to go and buy the candle, so that was perfect. And I lit the candle, and that night Thom died. And 3 days later, because at this time I had terrible, terrible asthma, so I would wake up coughing all the time. and I was in a terrible state. I was in Germany. And
Not that he's got anything against Germany.
no, but I was just away from my natural surroundings. It's bad enough to have all of this stuff without actually being away from home. And I was staying with some friends, but they had moved out, I think, because I was coughing all the time, and I wasn't probably a very nice person to be around. And I swear that I was lying there in the dark, and I heard a match being struck. And it was so vivid, I was thinking, had these friends come back during the night and they had lit the match, I sort of opened the door to check, but they hadn't, and I felt this incredibly strong vanilla candle in the room. And at other points, I have a terrible sense of smell, so you could be the sweatiest person, and I'd be crammed up to you in the tube and I still wouldn't smell you, but yet I smelt this, and from time to time I still do get visits of vanilla candle. Most recently on my birthday a couple of days ago. It was almost like Thom was saying, good luck with the book, So I don't think I wanted to have contact with him. It was just sort of.
Did you find it comforting?
No.
Oh, you didn't.
Not at all.
You see, some people I think will.
No, it was,
so I mean, I remember.
It was a bit like it was a bit like I got what it was like. The psychic sort of almost took on the shape of his body and sort of looked in a way that he did, and that's a bit like being given crack cocaine if you've lost somebody. That you want more and more and more, and actually that's just even bigger madness. So no, it was disturbing, and I didn't want any more, if that makes any sense.
It really does. It really does.
But
it's just what it is.
It's just all of this weird stuff that I mean, that, to be perfectly honest, I would have quite liked to chop all of that stuff out, but I decided not to edit myself. I
think it was a good decision to keep it in, because I think, as I've said, I've spoken to lots of people who've had similar-ish experiences, and I think depending on your belief system, you can put it down to different things. Some people who may have a faith may think it's something, and some other people might think it's something within them that is heightened, but we can't explain it. And perhaps we don't have to, I don't know. But one thing, when I said that to you, was it comforting? You said no. I mean, obviously one of the things that obviously comes through is, which I know all of you will understand, is that how utterly isolating and lonely it is when you lose somebody that close to you. And I think a lot of us would hope that we would retreat into the comfort of our families for some sort of succour, and so, he knows where I'm going with this. It's like, yes. But that was not the case. That was not the case. Just as a little sort of introduction to this part of the discussion, you came out quite late to your parents.
Yes, I came out at 30, which actually for my generation wasn't particularly late.
No.
And I came out for myself because I thought, I wonder if the fact that I'm trying to hide the boyfriends that I had beforehand might have something to do with the fact that none of them lasted. The case of therapist heal yourself. And miraculously, about 6 months later, I met Thom. So probably it was a very good decision. But that generation sort of didn't want to know, because in my family we don't talk about emotional things, because that's not nice, that's not English, that's not middle class, that's not home counties, because it's trying to get rid of all of that stuff and just pretend everything's fine.
And if you are in a situation where you decide, and as some gay people do, right, I'm just going to reject my family, it works to a certain extent. But if you decide that's not for me, and I actually want my family to acknowledge this person, and I want my family to acknowledge this person in my life, then you come up against problems.
Yeah.
And obviously, when Thom died, it just exacerbated an already difficult situation.
Yeah, I mean, what I say about bereavement is it takes the fault lines in your life and blows them apart at the time when you've got the least amount of energy to be able to deal with anything. So it is really difficult. And it was made more difficult by the fact that my parents had a timeshare in Portugal, and that's where they were when we had the memorial service here in England. My sister couldn't come because other people were counting on her on that particular day. So my cousin Sue was there, and an aunt and an uncle, but my parents weren't there. And I'm sure that, I mean, they have been absolutely wonderful since, and they have welcomed Ignacio into my life. And I know that if they had the time over, they would make entirely different choices.
Of course, and as we said earlier, I'm also giving a benefit of the doubt that it was a different time. I do feel that things have changed and things have moved on in a positive way. But just going back to, obviously, you in that situation having to deal with it, what happened?
Well, I'm ashamed of this. I refused to speak to them because I just didn't have the energy to argue with two old, stubborn people. So, I didn't. It was shortly after that. It was my mother's birthday. I didn't send her a card when they. I didn't send my father a birthday card. I mean, they would have been heartbroken by that. But I sort of needed to be in a strong enough place to say, when I did talk to them, to say, that I want us to have a different kind of conversation. I want us to be able to talk about emotional things. I want us to do things differently, and I needed to have enough strength that if it was a car crash, to sort of let them go home again without actually running after them, sort of kind of thing.
There's one very, very sad bit that I read. It was when it was your birthday, and you weren't speaking to them, and they sent him presents, and you put them in the cupboard because you didn't want to open them.
I didn't want them contaminating my birthday.
Yeah. That was really sad. But it does sort of have a sort of effect in that you did make peace with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you going to
And
ask me
I'm
to
going to
read
ask.
about
I
that?
am.
Yeah. Oh, good.
I just have something we made earlier that I'm going to ask you to read. Let me just find it for you. So you've sort of had the background really to that, and this is when they have the reconciliation.
So where are we starting?
So starting from here and
Right.
to there.
Right.
To there.
Okay.
Is that right?
My parents stepped off the train, full of anxious-to-please smiles and a chocolate cake that my mother had baked. During the 5-minute car journey from the station, she tried to make small talk, but I deflected her attempt to hide in the normal life. How can I discuss the views when I'm rehearsing how to break through years of niceness? The tension rose as my mother stared out of the window, searching for further topics of conversation. My father, as always, said nothing. The journey home had never seemed longer. If there were angry recriminations, I told myself I had the strength to let them walk out the door. But what if there was only the usual Marshall family damp squid? It's almost a parody of the English middle classes. I decided not to harangue my parents as soon as they crossed my threshold, and instead offered a cup of tea. As I passed round the chocolate cake, my stomach began to turn in on itself, and I could hardly swallow. My parents sat uneasily on Thom's German minimalist sofa, drinking out of his Rosenthal cups, with their feet on his Art Deco rug. The silence kept on building. I was sure they must be able to hear my heart pound, but the stillness was broken only by the clink of china on china as cup was replaced on saucer. I sipped my tea and tried to buy a few more moments. Fortunately, my mother was made of sterner stuff. Are we not allowed to know our fate, she asked. My mother put up a staunch defence about their failure to attend Thom's memorial service. My father's bad back meant that he really needed the holiday. She had to put him first. No flights were available to come back early, and in fact seats to Portugal are so rare they have to be booked for this autumn. My father said nothing. I was unmoved. Next I complained about how they treated Thom when he was alive. Apparently I'm too sensitive and too ready to take offence when none is intended. My father still said nothing. We appeared to have reached stalemate. I took a deep breath and was about to launch back onto the offensive when it suddenly hit me. Something incredible was happening in my living room. For the first time in our family's history, everything that had been left unspoken or articulated only with a sigh, a cold shrug, or walking away was being faced. The living room clock still ticked, the birds still sung in the wood at the bottom of the garden. The world had not ended. Have you any idea what it's like to know that your only son is hurting and being told there is nothing you can do to help? Nothing at all? Asked my mother, and she started to cry. What Thom would have described as real tears. Nothing I'd ever done had affected her so deeply. I felt more alive than ever before, except I had really hurt her. My father said nothing and did nothing to comfort his wife. My own mother once did something terrible that really hurt me, she continued, but she did not realise how much I understood and did not reproach her. What she meant, I thought, was, why don't you turn the other cheek too? I was tempted to blurt out, fool to put up with it, but I just nodded. Previously, articulating my feelings would have been labelled as showing weakness and laughed at, but this time I felt empowered. So I explained that when they ignored Thom or turned away, when I expressed something approaching a human emotion, that I felt unloved. For the first time, my father spoke. But you've always been our Andrew. It was the first time he has ever acknowledged any kinship, any closeness to me. That's nice to hear. I wish you'd told me earlier. We might not be very good with words, but we do love you. His face softened. But for me, saying we distanced everything, I replied as evenly as I could manage. When I'd come out to them, it had been my mother who told me, we love you, and after being challenged she turned this to, I love you. My father had kept his feelings firmly to himself. What would happen this time? The Art Deco rug between us seemed larger. I love you, he said. Do you realise that's the first time you've ever told me that? I choked out. I suppose it is. My heart was singing. I'd achieved more than I'd ever hoped.
So these quite incredible things started happening. I mean, really quite incredible things, and you're sort of going through it alone, but you are loved.
Well, I wasn't alone, because there were lots of marvellous people, some of whom are here this evening.
The dramatis persona. You must have a look in the back, actually, because you explain it all very well. It's really, you explain it very well. But yeah, it was sort of incredible, and it felt like your life had sort of gone exploded, and yet that was the first time your father had said that to you. That was massive. Yeah, it was a really big thing, actually. You also, during this period, did attend a couple of some counselling sessions.
Yes.
Which was less successful. It's quite interesting to me, because obviously you are, you are a counsellor. So, why do you think it didn't work for you?
Well, I think
were they just a bit crap?
I think there's a range of issues. I mean, I think the first one is, in a sense, I went, I think, too early.
Okay. Weren't ready, really.
Because I sort of didn't know what I wanted from the counselling, and if you don't know what you want, you're very unlikely to actually get it.
nobody tells you that.
I don't think they do tell you that. I also wanted, I discover now, because I'm older and wiser, I wanted to discuss sort of spiritual questions. I wanted to ask, what's the meaning of life, and my therapists weren't able to do that. And to be perfectly honest, if somebody had come to me when I was late 30s and wanted to discuss the meaning of life and spiritual things, I wouldn't have had the first idea how to do it. 20 years later, I have quite a different view of therapy, and I think that that there is a spiritual aspect to good therapy. And if somebody wants to come and talk to me about the meaning of life and all those other things, I'd be perfectly comfortable with it. But actually, a lot of therapists aren't, because a lot of people in this world aren't. Actually, not only do you have to come out as gay, but you also have to come out as somebody, as a spiritual person who's prepared to talk and think about these things. Because actually, if death is difficult to talk about, religion and faith and all those other things are equally difficult to talk about. So we've got another set of things. So it was sort of the sort of things that helped me were far more it was a different level. It was things like going on pilgrimages to places that were significant to Thom. Actually, it's sort of what made me a playwright, because going to the theatre was far more healing, because in the theatre you've got all these characters who are trying to change, and they're on a journey, and they're trying to grow, and that when you're stuck, going to the theatre and seeing all these people growing, even if they were actually growing in a negative direction, at least they were changing. That was absolutely wonderful. So I got much more out of a night at the theatre than I got. I learnt more from life from going to see David Hare play than going to a therapist. And actually, as it turned out, the tickets were cheaper than an hour.
But there was one form of therapy that worked for you,
right?
And that was Tyson. Do you want to tell them a bit about Tyson?
So
explain who Tyson is.
So Tyson was a dog, and Tyson was sort of like a force of nature. That is Sarah here tonight? She was talking about possibly coming. It was a friend, and they have a dog that was so badly behaved it was not allowed to meet any of their visitors. It was normally locked in the kitchen. And for some reason it was allowed out, and Tyson and I, by some sort of miracle of fate, got on incredibly well. And they said, "Oh well, why don't you have Tyson?" It was just a joke. And I said, "Well, and this is one of the things that Thom, I think this is one of the positive things about bereavement, is that hopefully you take on some of the better characteristics of your beloved." And Thom was the sort of person who said, "Well, actually, next time you go on holiday, we'll look after Tyson for you." And so I did it partly because it's the sort of nice random act of kindness that Thom would have done. He used to do things like, every time before he went away on holiday, he would send a postcard to somebody who would never expect a postcard from him. So, he'd talk to somebody, his bank teller that he went to the bank in, and he'd get their name and address, and he'd send them a postcard from their holiday, which is sort of a lovely thing to do. And so I'd also thought, I'd quite like a dog myself one day, when I'm like 70 or something like that. And so I thought, well, at least I can try out having a dog without any commitment. So Tyson arrives, complete with a number of where to send him if it doesn't work out. And he runs into the house. I mean, he literally ran around the house like a banshee, drunk from the toilet, and it was like I just sat there quietly, and then he finally came and he sat down at my feet, and was sort of relaxed enough for me to go out that evening with. This is another one of my disasters with my new boyfriend. Oh my God. We went out to the cinema, and we came back, and Peter said, the lights are on in your house. And I said, oh, that's strange. He said, there are people sitting in your living room. I thought, how weird. He said, there's some people sitting in your living room watching television. I thought, burglars don't come round to watch your television. So we opened the door, and there were my next door neighbours, Valerie and Michael, watching television with Tyson. And that he had been making so much noise, other neighbours thought we got a dog trapped in the garage. And to try and so they came round to look after Tyson, and they thought while they were there they'd watch television. So, and he went into that. Took him for a walk, and he disappeared, and I couldn't find him anywhere. And I was thinking, oh my God, I'm going to have to phone them up and tell them that I've lost their dog. And suddenly he arrived in the middle of Twitton. Twitton is a narrow pathway in Sussex. It's the Sussex for a narrow pathway. This very elderly man in a dressing gown arrived in this Twitton with Tyson, and he said, your dog let himself into my house. I left the door open for the doctor. He came up into my bed and climbed into bed with me.
So funny.
That's just some of the things that
and you went on to have Flash, who I met, who was a lovely dog, and now you've got Pumpkin.
You looked after Flash for me.
I looked after Flash.
Yeah, and I mean that's something that's entirely changed my life. I've become a dog owner. I mean, ultimately, one of the most healing thing actually really was getting Flash, because Flash was a dog that wanted, that Flash wanted to be with me everywhere all the time. So, he used to come with me to relate, to meet all my clients. He used to come absolutely everywhere with me.
So sweet, isn't it? Well, thank you so much for talking to me. I kind of think maybe now is the time to open it up and to ask if anyone else, from what we've talked about, or just just in general, if anyone wants to ask Andrew any questions or carry on the discussions we've already had. But you don't have to. Absolutely, you don't have to.
While you're thinking of a question, I'd sort of rather like to ask a couple of questions to.
Do it.
Yes. Perhaps you could come and sit here on my seat, because I just wondered if Maureen, you might like to share some of your memories of Thom with us.
Yes.
Let's give her a round of applause, because it'll help Come and join us.
Yeah, come and join us. And then I'm also going to ask my cousin Sue, who's here as well, and my friend Elaine, who's also here as well. So you had that Maureen was absolutely wonderful, because she provided information headquarters, so I didn't have to deal with people phoning me up and asking what's happening. And I feel slightly ashamed of this, but I actually asked you to phone my parents, and partly because you were in England, and tell them that Thom had died. Perhaps you'd like to tell us that story.
I can't really remember very much about that particular one. I can remember so much about the whole thing, but I can't remember that.
Well, when you phoned up, you spoke to my father, who didn't actually say a word to you. He said, "Oh, hang on, I'll go and get Jill."
No, that sounds about right.
Not, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry to hear about this."
No. Is there anything that does particularly? You said that it must have brought up a few memories.
Oh my goodness me! Well, about Thom, loads and loads of memories. I mean, but the thing is, it's a sad time, and when I'm talking to you and listening to you, I feel like crying.
Yeah.
At the same time, I only have very, very happy memories of Thom. I mean, we have, just crazy stuff. I mean, when Andrew was talking about not coming out until 6 months before he met Thom, he decided to invite Thom over for Christmas.
No, Thom invited himself over.
However, Andrew was going to his parents for Christmas. And so he said, "Is it okay if I leave Thom with you?" So poor Thom arrived at my house on Christmas morning, not having met any of us, that my daughter's there, she can remember it very, very well. And he came in, and I mean, and it was like, he just there, and he just sat in. And then on Christmas morning, all of our neighbours and lots of friends came in, and lots of people came, and it was, and he didn't know a soul, but it was, you almost didn't have to look after him because he just incorporated with everybody. It was just wonderful. But we had a friend who used to do this silly song.
And party piece.
So it's party piece, but it was about German things. It was, there's mine hands on mine shoulders, and what is this here? And I'm thinking, oh my God. What's he going to think? He's going to feel terribly insulted. And in the end, Tom's sitting there, and there's mine hands on my shoulders. So when I say it was all happy memories, that's what it was like. Oh, he arrived a complete stranger that morning, and he left a friend, and he was a friend until he died. And there you go. What can you say?
Oh, thank you.
So it's there we are.
Thank you.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
And do you want to sit there, or do you want to come down here, Elaine, and join us here? Because it'd be lovely to hear from you too.
I always remember one thing with Thom. Oh, hang on, can I walk? Hang on, sorry. Just my hand up.
Yeah.
I remember when you used to you'd be writing for the Mail, and you'd come downstairs and you'd go, now what do you think about this subject? So I said, well, I think it would be this is a very good idea. Da, 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 da. And then Thom would say, yes, and I think this. And then Andrew would go rushing upstairs on his typewriter, and he'd yell on the stairs, what was it again? And I said, it says, this is it. And he goes, and I said to Thom one day, I said, do you know, Thom, who's writing this article? We don't get a cut. He's making all the money, and he's our inspiration. But Thom was just really wonderful. And yeah, I used to see quite a lot of him because I used to, and that's it, yeah. He's a very special person.
Thank you very much.
Oh, that's really kind.
Sorry, not a big memory, but I
it was
remember.
lovely.
No, it is. It's a lovely memory.
We thought, Thom and I thought we were being really hard done by.
I'm still waiting for that card.
Oh, right.
Thank you.
And Sue, would you come up as well? Sue is my cousin.
You will get a chance to have a glass of wine afterwards and chat to people as well, so we won't keep you, we promise we won't keep you.
Squeeze through there.
Yes, thank you. Gosh, we haven't got that. Really, yeah, we've done it.
Yeah. So, what memories do you have of Thom?
Well, now then, I heard about Thom, of course, before I met him,
Right.
and I could sense immediately that he was something very special for you. I should also say that there are two veins in our family. There's the emotional vein, and there's the other one.
You're in the army or the police.
Yes, but I don't count myself as part of that. But anyway, so I could see immediately that Thom had somehow centred you in a way that I'd felt that you were sort of slightly unanchored. I think we both were at that sort of age. And then, of course, I was imagining what I thought Thom would be like. And it was, you wrote to me and you said, you know, come for dinner, or I can't even remember what the first occasion was.
Yeah.
I think you'd invited us for supper. And I saw that Thom was spelt Thom. And he was suddenly so much more exciting. Because you think you know who Thom is, but when you see Thom, it's got an intrigue to it. And of course I thoroughly enjoyed meeting him. He became, part of the family as far as we were concerned. He was very kind. He was always very properly dressed. He was a huge mentor for people in Germany, and he took his role as an educator extremely seriously. But I guess most important of all, he made you happy. And you've got to love someone who makes somebody that you care for very happy. And Thom was very easy to like, very easy to love. And he's always tied up in my life because when my husband Derek and I married, we had the singer Stacey Kent, who sang at our wedding. And Andrew asked me for the contact for her to sing at Thom's funeral. So for me, it's always very, very bittersweet that, because she sang one song which she'd sung, you know, at both events.
Gosh,
So she
I
was
didn't
like a
realise
kind
that.
of
Yeah.
continuum. And then, of course, I just had my daughter. I can't remember how old she would have been at
She
that
was
point.
like 3 weeks old or something like
Yeah.
that.
Well, did I not? I can't, when was it again? Was it
So, 20 years ago.
20 years ago? So yes, I had a newborn baby and a 2.5, 3-year-old who was full of life and bouncing around, running all over the place. And it did strike me then, you know, how, you know, death and life is so opposite sides of the coin. And I knew too what you were going to have to face, because my own father, Andrew's mother's brother, died very young, and I know how that affected us on our side of the family, and I knew you were in for a really rough ride.
And Sue was, and unfortunately, Sue, you'll find she hasn't read it yet.
No, I
You'll
haven't.
find there are a few of your experiences in it as well, because Sue was one of the few people I could have those sort of conversations with, and that is a huge bond. So I'm sorry, you'll find quite a lot of yourself in my book.
I'm worried now.
Don't be worried. I'm thinking, because we haven't got that long,
Yeah.
perhaps we should adjourn over there, and if you've got questions, you can bring them over there and we can have a glass of wine.
Right.
And I think you've deserved it. You deserve a glass of wine.
Thank you.
You've worked very emotionally hard.
Book sign.
We just
Yes.
say, and oh yes, I must just say, please, let's give a plug for the book. Please buy it and read it. It really is a remarkable book, and a very brave book, I feel, and it really helped me, and I just think it's something that you can read and pass on to somebody else, because it's about all of us. It really is. So yeah, please do, and I'm sure you'll do signing as well.
I'll.
So can we give all of our guests, including obviously Andrew, a huge round of applause. Himself. Thank you very much, Ignacio, for your filming. So let's all go over and have a drink, and we'll have a chat and all of the rest of it. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, okay.
Have you looked in the back? And I forgot as well until I looked in my diary and there it was.
No, I just think you exactly one of my friends' partnerships, and I was like, I know what this is.
I'm so excited. I can't wait to read this book. It's absolutely there. But it's so interesting though, because a very dear friend of ours, he died last March, out of the blue. Just got found out had an aneurysm, and seeing the pain that his wife is going through, has gone through. I suppose these things
Oh, what do we have here?
Thank you. Thank you. Nice to see you. Bye bye. Thank you.
Go. There you go.
Yeah.
Don't let me hit the deck, Ignacio.
Now I'm going to be on the
If I hit the floor, they'll all say I've been to Hawaii.
I will have it in the camera anyway. It will be in YouTube quicker than you say quick.
Just as in Paris.